Hello and welcome to this review of my Honda CB125f. Okay, so beginning with the overall view of this particular motorcycle, it is not your average dream 125 for a 17-year-old that's come off of a two-stroke moped because they want to go as fast as possible and they lean everywhere pretending they're Dovey. But I don't think that means you should just write it off as an option. I think it is a pretty good motorcycle for my kind of learning experience and the first 2 or so years of my proper motorcycle riding career. So to elaborate on the previous point, this is not a knee down on every roundabout, tucking down, trying to get 80, 75, 70 mile an hour bike for learning how to ride properly without having to feel like you have to ride like a yob or a knob everywhere, as I see a fair amount of people my age doing. So to start on the feel of the bike, which as I say isn't a particularly big bike feeling thing because it weighs absolutely nothing with a full tank. And it hasn't got certain things like a kill switch on the handlebar because it's got a side stand switch and that's all you legally need. And it doesn't have certain niceties like a digital screen or anything like that. However, this bike does have the, not really a feature, but it is a Honda, which gets you a bit more respect in the older community where they see Chinese bikes how they used to be, where they were basically made out of like screws and bolts off of the floor from a proper factory. So as soon as you manage to whip off the L plates on this thing, if you choose to, you get a lot of respect from other people on the road that are on a lot bigger bikes. And just whilst I'm here, I might as well point out, I did say it's not really great for if you're going to try and knee down every roundabout, or God forbid you go around a proper corner. That's nothing that a 17-year-old has done on a motorcycle. That is mostly because this bike is not particularly made for it, because there's little like rubbery, not too sporty pegs down here, which I'll show you in the edit, and they are pretty much low enough to the point where you are going to scrape them before you knee down or scrape anything else, because I've managed to do it a fair few times. But to be fair, that's sort of a stabilizer sort of thing from a normal bike. It means that you're not going to get too ahead of yourself on trying to corner everything at 48, 45 degrees. Now then, what comes with that light bike, not really built to be like a fake 600, is that it is incredibly easy to maneuver when it's turned off, when it's turned on. It means that you can basically turn on a dime. So anytime you're coming up to like traffic lights and you suddenly decide that you want to move to a different lane or something, you can do that incredibly quickly, incredibly smoothly, incredibly easily, because it weighs like probably less than me. So getting back to the overview of what I think this bike is, I think it could be a learner bike, it could be a 17-year-old's bike, it could be anything up to 19. But also, I think it would probably serve as a pretty good A2 or A bike, just because if you need to do not particularly far commuting, but like a few slow roads, like more of a slow-paced commute, I think this is a pretty good bike because it's got amazing fuel economy. It is pretty comfortable for what it is, and it's not something where you can easily get in trouble. The only way that you're really going to do that is in a speed limit that isn't really above 50. I mean, of course you can go up to about 60, 65. I've hit 70, but it is a bit of a push. You're not going to get a lot of speeder tickets on this, even if you're like a proper knob. Which is why I think it could serve as more than just an A1 bike or an L plate bike or a CBT bike. So I mean, it's got quite a wide range of possible uses and possible demographics. But I mean, given that I've got the younger experience, I'm probably going to see this as a more of a learner bike, and that's probably what I'm going to cover a bit more in this review. Elaborating a bit more on the power, obviously this is a 125 as stated in the name, and obviously it is not going to be tearing you down the motorway, especially if you have it out of the factory at 8 horsepower, or even as mine is with this lovely Scorpion exhaust that I'll also cut to, which Scorpion claim around 2 horsepower gain from their dyno graph that they have on their website. So this takes it from 8 to 10, obviously. 10 is sort of like the minimum. So you can obviously ride it at 8, but 10 is sort of where most of the 125s on the market start, or a bit above on like the ones that have 15 or 13 more like, because none of them really have 15. And as I say, I have hit about 70, but obviously with limited horsepower, you're not going to do that all the time. It's going to struggle at high speeds, and it's mostly going to be any use if you can manage to use the power band, which is probably about 5 to 7k, and have most of that be quite high up torque. Now obviously you still get quite a lot of low down torque, because I've had this in first gear and just tried to rev it like a knob and almost wheelied it by accident. But still, you're going to want to be quite high up in the revs whilst you're moving, and you learn quite quickly that any gear that you can take an island in, you want to be 1 or 2 down so that you can actually come off that island with some speed. And also any corner that you want to be in, that you want to be coming out of, in a lower gear than the highest possible one, because otherwise you really don't have any punch out, you don't have any speed out. It's the only way to really get any acceleration, and like very slow, and then suddenly, not a massive amount, but about twice as much as it gets from like 3 to 4k RPM. From that point on, it gets quite considerably more than under that, unless you're literally like in first gear doing 2 to 3. Also, as a side note, I would recommend, if you're going to get one of these, either look for one with a Scorpion exhaust, or consider adding on the price to whatever you pay for it for that exhaust, because I think it sounds great. It makes you far, far more visible to anyone on the road, and also, whilst normally 2 horsepower wouldn't be much, on this bike it's 25% gain, and that is quite considerable. And also it comes with a baffle, so that if you don't want to be very leery, you can then put it in if you're going to be riding at night, or like if you're just quite a subdued person. I am quite willing to be very loud, especially when it's a safety aspect, which I think, considering that like this is quite a small bike and it doesn't take up a lot of view, you kind of need. And also I think that's probably, it is quite bright, so you've still got that going for you even if you don't have a loud bike. So I'm 18 coming up on 19 in August, so obviously I haven't had a massive experience on a load of different bikes, but having ridden the moped that I had before this when I was 16, which was also a Honda, and this, I would say the suspension is pretty good for what it is. Obviously it's not going to be like track suspension, it's not going to be something that you want to be doing on or off power with, either like stressing out the back or diving the front. But I would say if you're at a normal pace, and maybe even like pushing it a bit for what I can do, which is not a massive amount obviously, because I haven't got the experience under my belt to be choosing how to do lines on the road, as you shouldn't really be doing, but also as I can't do. So what I can say about the suspension is that it is very comfortable for longer rides, and I'd say I've most often than not got more irritated by the seat before I have any bumpiness in the suspension, because obviously with massive rocks and massive potholes you're going to get it quite bad, but going over like slightly bad road surface and like a bit of gravel, it's not bad at all. It is well damped. And on the topic of long journeys, as I said, this bike has excellent fuel economy, and I would say going back and forth to college, which is probably 4 or 5 miles every day, and going to work most days, it was rare that I had to fill it up more than once every 1.5 to 2 weeks. And whilst doing my A1, I went on long rides with like larger bikes, and they had to fill up both before and after the long journeys that we would do as practice, and this would go down maybe 1/4 of a tank, and that was like good 15 to 20 mile round trips. So if you're moving up from an automatic moped or bike from 16, starting at 17, or even a late bloomer later in life for biking, you are not going to be an expert in gears or how to change them on a bike. Obviously this is a 5-speed, so it's your normal 1 down 4 up with neutral, as it should be, in between 1 and 2. And I would say the clutch and the gearbox are both pretty forgiving, because I've had a few incidents where I've been very tired or not paying attention because I'm just like wandering off into another world and all I'm really paying attention to is the car in front. And I've changed down when I'm supposed to be going up, or up when I'm supposed to be going down, and you either get a really loud, horrible noise, or you wind up with chugging that means it's hard to run and it's struggling to actually get up in the RPMs because of how badly it's running. I would say that the clutch and the gearbox are quite forgiving in these moments, because the engine braking is quite hard, so as long as you're not still trying to accelerate when you go down a gear, which you normally hear about it and stop, the engine braking sorts it out and it really brings down the RPMs quite quickly, so you're not doing massive damage or sounding like a massive idiot for too long. But also, when you go up a gear when you're trying to slow down, it does sort out the fuel pretty quickly, so you can get back up into the RPMs or just change down gears quite quickly, which I've heard from a few other people that if they change more than 1 gear, their gearbox gets locked. That doesn't really happen with this gearbox. As long as you're not just trying to mash it down like several times, it does do it quite seamlessly. The only thing is if you're going from 5th to like 1st or something ridiculous, it gets a bit of a upset. But obviously that also gets sorted out quite quickly. And I would say if you don't manage to pull the clutch in all the way, or you forget to like close the throttle, it is quite good for not jumping forwards or like kicking you forwards with the clutch. So that's pretty smooth compared to what I've been told other people's are, and thus that kind of makes it a good learner bike. So usually with bikes that have this kind of naked or quite like sort of classic style, I would say, you normally get a conversation about how the aero goes. And I would say this bike is pretty good, as you would kind of expect from a Honda. So this doesn't look like it would do much, but I would say with the 2 shark helmets that I've had over my riding career, I've never experienced serious buffeting, and it doesn't do what other people sort of report about bikes that don't have massive aero producing shields, which is as soon as you turn your head gets whipped to the side. I've never experienced that. So the aero is pretty good. So normally with the naked or classic sort of style that I would describe this as, you would normally get a conversation about aero. And I have never had a lot of the problems that other people have had with these sort of like quite minimal front shielding instead of having like the sports bike windshield all the way back. Because with the two Shark helmets that I've had in the past, I've never experienced serious buffeting. I've never had that whip to the side that other people say they have as soon as they turn their head. It's always been pretty good. So, I can't speak for people of all kinds, but as a bang on average 5'10" male, this is a very comfortable bike. So when you've got your legs up, they follow the nice line. They are maybe a bit bent, but if you ever feel like they're too much, you can just sort of put your foot back a bit and give them a bit of a stretch, or just sort of like stick your leg out, but it's a bit dangerous. Now there are a few seating positions I like to do if I'm quite paying attention and I know there's a few curves coming up. I like to keep a bit tight to the bike, and that means that I can have a bit more feel of where the weight is. And in this position, my arms are sort of like a natural dropped, relaxed position where I can reach the levers, I can throttle, I can do everything. The other one is sort of all the way back, trying to get a bit more of a wider seat, because as I say, on longer journeys the seat can be a tiny bit uncomfortable, but I would say that's after 3/4 of an hour to an hour of riding. So you're not going to come across that in a normal ride. That's sort of more of a, if you're purposely going out on quite a long ride, or I suppose if you're on a one-off quite far journey. But if you're going to be doing miles and miles on a motorway, as I say, this isn't that good. It's not that comfortable. So, as I say, I can't speak for everyone, but I can probably guess that this bike would be pretty good for shorter riders, because if I stand flat-footed, I can get 1.5 inches off of the bike at the front, and then if I go to a further back point, it's about 1.5 to 2 inches off of the bike. And obviously, as I am pretty much in the middle of the males, but quite tall on an overall between everyone range, that means if you're a bit shorter, you're either going to be quite comfortable with both feet, or you're going to be pretty near both feet, maybe having to do a bit of a lean. So, to combine the aero and the ergonomic aspect, if you were going to sustain higher speeds, or if you wanted a bit more excitement out of it, or you just wanted to feel a bit faster, if you're going to tuck in to about this far, that is a pretty comfortable position with all of the air passing over your head all the way back to probably about the normal riding position. But obviously, if you're exceptionally tall or trying to sit back because you have been sat on the seat for quite a while, it does become a bit of a drag and you become a bit of a parachute. So, getting on to the more boring reliability area, I would say I could count on one hand the amount of times it hasn't started or has sounded a bit chuggy up on start. And all of those times, either if it failed, it'll start up next time fine, or if I give it a bit more fuel on startup, it'll be absolutely fine and I won't have any issues the rest of the day.